chairperson. Thank you. Good evening, everybody who's here today. I'm Rosalind Lee, the chairperson of the Sydney Alumni. Thank you for joining this session today. Welcome to Sister Frances from the beautiful land of New Zealand.
Thank you.
And we have, sorry, I've just got something blocking my screen. And we hope to have others join in as we have our chat tonight. Yeah, thank you for giving up your time to connect again. 2022 has been much better than the 2 last years we've had with the wretched virus. It's under control, and we're happy to be able to get back to seeing friends and catching up, attending functions, just a simple way able to hug each other, do the normal things. This is our final session for 2022. This is your life. And we do have more in store for 2023. So if you know of anyone that will be interested, please let us know. We'll be able to have a chat with them and see how we go. So our fun-loving committee, we have Emily Koroi, we have Angela Leong Duckworth, Judy Bulatiko, and Slatter. They have been working behind the scenes, planning discussions, and they fine-tuned tonight's production. So everyone, I hope you have a drink. Sit back and enjoy the Talanoa as we have an insight into our alumni guest tonight. Thank you.
Thanks, Ros. Can we ask Pam to just open up with a short prayer, please? Thank you. Pam, you need to unmute.
Here we are. Right. Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit, amen. Dear Lord, we ask through the intercession of St. Joseph, our school patron, and your earthly father, to be with us tonight as we listen and share in the life journey of our esteemed alumna. We're all part of the same family, and as we gather together from different parts of the world, we trust that you will provide grace for us all as we enjoy and are inspired by what we hear tonight. And we thank you for this opportunity. We ask all of this through Christ our Lord. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Pam. Ange will do the acknowledgement of country.
The ex-SJSS alumni of Sydney, Australia acknowledges and pays respect to the past, present, and future traditional custodians and elders of this nation, and the continuation of cultural, spiritual, and educational practices of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples.
Vinaka. Thank you, everyone, and welcome to tonight's session. My name is Emily Koroi, and I'm your anchor for tonight. We have our guest who actually started off her life being a very avid reader right from the start. This was actually quite obvious from the age of 2. And apparently she has an uncle who was the principal of a primary school at the time, who had to order books from New Zealand. And these books apparently were a lot bigger than our 2-year-olds. And she kept reading through her years of primary school. The family moved to the UK in her early years, and she started off her education in the UK from kindy to class 4, and she attended St. Joseph's, Watford Way, London. When they moved to Fiji, she went to St. Anne's, which she hated the uniform thereafter, wearing that beautiful uniform out in the UK. But she went through to St. Joseph's in Waimanu Street and graduated with a class of 97. She went on to become a lawyer and is currently practicing and living in Queensland. So please welcome our guest, Miss Heilala Tabete. Welcome, Heilala. You're on mute, Heilala.
Thank you, Emily, and thank you to the St. Joseph Sydney alumni. It's a pleasure and a privilege to be here tonight, and I'm so glad that my staff member reminded me that Sydney was 1 hour ahead, because I would have been on the road otherwise.
Thank you, H. And I know that you've been very busy, especially in the last few weeks. we'll start off, H, with you just giving us a little bit about your background, where you're living now, but also what, how did you manage when we all went into lockdown?
All right. Well, just a little bit about myself. I'm Indigenous Fijian, and as you all know, I'm from the Fiji Islands. I am from Yaroi, Matuku in Pau. My mother, or my Koronivasu, is from the Masao clan of Mbao Island in Tailebu. I am one of 5 biological siblings. I'm the middle child. Mom, put your microphone on mute, please. And if you were to add the adopted that we've taken into our family, it's 7 in total. I'm still the middle child. We have a brother who's the eldest, and I'm sure in many ways he's quite thankful that he's the eldest, and 6 girls that follow after him. Yeah, it certainly made quite interesting growing up and crossing country boundaries with a very large clan, and but we've been all the more richer for it growing up in a large and an extended household.
You have that very famous saying. What is it? Cousins are your first best friends.
Yes.
Something. What about your alumni years? So how did you find going into school at St. Anne's after relocating from the UK? It would have been quite different.
Admittedly, even for a very young person, I think I caught the tail end of class 3 going into class 4, and it was a bit of a shock when all you've known is cold, blistery, grey weather, heavy uniforms, and then coming into hot heat and light cotton uniforms. The one thing that was consistent was nuns who ran the show from both the UK to St. Anne's, and they were to be revered and respected. So yeah, it was a transition of sorts. I as a young child growing up, I learned very early on in the piece the value of good friendships, and even from my infant days, I still stay friends with my UK primary school friends on Facebook. Wow. As well as across St. Anne's and in St. Joseph's. St. Joseph's, that's lifelong friendships, and I'm sure all of you know that. But my own good friends from St. Joseph, those in my class, we have a Viber group. We form the nexus of a very strong network of support in both Fiji and abroad, and they're your first port of call. It's not only lifelong friendship, you become sisters, and that's just the beautiful thing, of going to a school that has a very strong alumni. The other thing I think we also take for granted and we notice is that it just comes down generationally. So we see our mothers and our aunts and our grandmothers and our grandaunts emulate the same thing, and we just pick up from where they've left off.
Absolutely. Okay, let's take a trip down memory lane of your days in St. Joseph's. Any recollections of your worst or best days at school, and why? Who was your favorite teacher?
Yeah, sure. So I think best days were any day that ended in a half day or was in a mufti, because it meant we could always finish early. Worst days, I think 2 occasions stick out to me. One would be my very first day in St. Joseph. I was the gawky teenager with the thick glasses, the MC Hammer haircut, and socks and shoes were all the rave at that time, the early 90s. And my sister, so I was coming into Form 3, and my older sister, Carlesi, was in Form 6. And she was part of the cool group with sandals and, the slightly rebellious group of friends. And I remember seeing her across from where the grotto is, but just out in that middle open section, and running towards her to try and flag to her that I was there, not seeing a huge puddle in between her and I. I went slip sliding, got mud caked all over my brand new school uniform. And I just remember the sheer look of horror and the fleeting expression of wanting to guise me there and then by the older sister, as they do. Thankfully, she was a bit more kinder and helped me up and tried to get me cleaned up as best as I could and told me not to approach her and her friends ever again. So that's probably one. The second was worst day at school is playing volleyball on our newly formed bottom netball courts at the time that led into the larger track area down the back. For some reason, my voice could always be heard from the staff room and always picked out along with two others. But yeah, it was my first time I ever served detention. They told us to weed the front bushes facing Waimanu Rd. I'd never held a cane knife in my entire life. I didn't know what to do with it. I was probably just playing with grass or hacking it. But the Suva grammar bus came down. And I remember throwing the cane knife under one bush and diving under the other. It was a lesson of indignity, if ever, and I've never forgotten it. Yeah. Favorite teachers, a few come to mind. There was Gianna the Vuilati. She was fantastic. She was my English teacher. She was always kind. There was Agatha Ferre. I think that's her maiden name. I don't know what her married name is. She was quite funky. And, that time you're growing up through the teenage awkward years and, all boys are horrible. And she'd tell us things like her mantra was, no man or woman is an island. We didn't know what that meant until much later on in life. But one that stands out, I think, is Miss Anita Singh. I think she became Miss Bidesi when we were in Form 5. She was newly married at the time, and she was quite honest and open with us about, being or becoming like a supportive partner to your life partner. And she used to tell us quotes like, there is strength in vulnerability. And I never really knew what that meant until much later on in my years. So I've never forgotten those teachers, all female teachers, but I think all pretty equipped to speak to the young female heart and just give us some really good life lessons along the way.
I have to say, I feel so old now, Heilala, and I know I'm a few years older than you because I do not recognize the names of those teachers at all. Okay, now, while you were in school, do you recall the genre of literature that you enjoyed while you were still in St. Joseph's?
If I was to be really honest, I didn't read romance novels while they were in St. Joseph. Harlequin romance and a little bit of Mills and Boons, but for the sake of my mother, watching on the screen, I will admit that I did like the genre of detective investigative type books. So Nancy Drew, the Hardy Boys, they were all the rave as well. And then just some other teenage fiction too, Emily. Yeah.
Isn't your father actually listening in as well?
No, I hope not.
What other interests and hobbies do you enjoy?
Look, other than reading, I do like traveling. I think that's been picked up. But in particular, I like to just go to new places. As of late, my more recent hobby has been to get out into nature and just appreciate, creation at its best, taking some time out to breathe in deeply, enjoy the simple things, which may even include taking family along the way and building memories out of that. Yeah.
Now, with your traveling, and I know that this is quite, anyone who knows you know that you pop up all over the world, surprising family and friends. What's your favorite city to visit and why?
Before it used to be a certain city in New York, but I've just recently returned from the Balkan states, and I think I've just developed a real newfound appreciation for that part of the world. Any state that's close enough or near the Adriatic Sea. So I recently come back from Croatia and Bosnia Herzegovina, and I would love to get back into that part of the world. It's the richness in history. History again was a former favorite subject of mine, but it's also just to see another part of the world that's really different. When we were growing up in the UK, we saw a lot of Western Europe, but this was probably my first introduction to, former Balkan states and former, Eastern European countries. So just a difference in the culture. Understanding that part of the world, even though the wars around that part have ended a couple of decades ago, still suffer, and you visually see the remnants of that war. And yet the people, there's just a perseverance and a hope within them to keep carrying on and to trying to build a better future for their future generations, not having forgotten the costly lesson of what war does to countries and communities. And so, yeah, I would really like to get back into that side of the world.
Wow. I remember when we used to do that too. We covered that in history. But oh my goodness, and during those days too, you used to think, why are we learning the history of these countries? We're never ever going to be there or see these places. But then the world has only just gotten smaller, hasn't it?
Yeah, that's right. And as I said, in history, we learned the origins of World War I and II, and how it started off from within those Balkan states. So, to see the continuation of that and the ramifications of it, it's quite amazing. Yeah,
exactly. Now, if you could live anywhere in the world besides your current address, where would it be and why?
I think I'd still like to live in New York. New York in the US of A. I went through a period towards the end of my university years where apart from being an avid watcher of Sex and the City at that time, I loved that city. I got an opportunity to visit there with a cousin of mine, and my aunt was part of the Fiji diplomatic corps based in New York, and so we had a wonderful introduction to it. But New York's just one of those cities, you'll either love it or you'll hate it, and I loved it. The buzz, the people who can be incredibly rude but also incredibly helpful as well. And it is a concrete jungle, but you sort of perceive the seat of power that comes from it. And again, not to quote the song, but it's the stuff that dreams are made of.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, recently you attended a conference in Cambridge, and you were there during the funeral procession of Queen Elizabeth II. May she rest in peace. Can you relate a little about what it was like being physically present there at the time history was being made with the passing of the longest reigning monarch?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Emily. It's probably like nothing I've ever experienced, to be truthful. It felt like the whole world was trying to get into London. And we just happened to be going to a conference that overlapped with the time of her funeral and burial, and it was quite amazing to be there. As you mentioned before, we grew up in the UK, so Queen Elizabeth's probably the only queen that I've ever known in my lifetime. My parents, but my mother in particular, was an avid royal follower. I think she really liked Princess Diana. May she rest in peace. But starting off schooling in the UK, we learned very early about the British monarchy. And in class 1, we were made to learn things like King Henry VIII and his 6 wives, and where they were buried. We'd be taken on school excursions to Peterborough, and here lay one wife, Catherine of Aragon. So it was entrenched quite early in my life, and then to be in the UK at her passing and her state funeral, it just felt like I was coming full circle. No one quite does pomp, pageantry, and ceremony like the British. They're like in a league of their own. So for London, which is one of the busiest cities in the world, to come to an absolute standstill is remarkable. The logistics involved in that. Everywhere you went, it seemed like every marketing billboard and advertising in the tube stations were just filled with her image and her insignia. And you felt it. You felt the just that blanket of it was like a wave of respect, but tinged in grief. And we couldn't get to Buckingham Palace. The crowds were 7 to 8 lines deep. And there were road closures everywhere in anticipation of her funeral procession in the days leading up. So I went to the next best thing, which was the Australia House in London, to sign the book of condolences. And even then, the level of respect that even the embassy staff and police on the street showed for you wanting to participate in such a historic occasion was remarkable. A cousin and I then went on to Green Park, which is just behind Buckingham Palace, and the floral tributes and bouquets, it was like a carpet. It just stretched for as far as the eye could see. And it was something quite special and something I'd live with for the rest of my life.
You were meant to be there, Paige, at that time. Like you said, it came full circle. Now I'm going to actually ask you about the Kingdom International Legal Network. Now, a few years ago when that first started, I think it opened the eyes and the hearts of many people, because whenever people talked about lawyers, you actually talked about lawyers making big money, lawyers who are crooked, or lawyers who's a good friend and who will look after you. And then this came out. Now you are a driving force behind this. Can you tell us a little bit about it?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Emily. So the Kingdom International Legal Network is it's a network of lawyers. It actually got birthed out of the law firm that I work for, and a Christian law firm out of Suva, Fiji, called Shekinah Law Firm. Shekinah Law, and their principal is Laurel Varasi. She was formerly a president of the Fiji Law Society, but we crossed paths by an introduction by St. Joseph alumni who passed away a couple of years ago. And the heart of that introduction was to introduce us together to see what sort of collaborative work we could do about encouraging the next generation of lawyers that were, I think, initially coming through Fiji. We had discussions. We talked about, really forming deep and abiding friendships that would go beyond each of our borders, beyond the two firms, and just mutual encouragement in the journey of Christian faith as professionals. Now, to understand law is to understand that, most of its foundations come out of the Judeo-Christian background. So really, it was almost like a return to basics in terms of, let's use biblical principle to encourage our lawyers that, ethically and practice-wise, this is how you increase your standard of excellence if you, follow these forms of principles. We don't profess to get everything right. We're human and we're fallible, but it's a good starting point. So what we did was we, in order to grow the network, we conducted exchanges between the two firms. We had one of the junior lawyers come across to our firm here in Brisbane, and we sent one of our associates back to the firm in Fiji. They did a 1-month exchange, and then Fiji did some exchanges with law firms in the Solomon Islands as well as in other parts of Fiji, including Lautoka and in the Sinu area. We've just finished a second exchange, but at a higher level, where our managing director went across for 2 weeks, and we're going to be hosting the principal of that firm here in Brisbane for 2 weeks in February. As a result of just seeing, the encouragement, the cross-cultural experiences, the opportunity to be able to practice in a different jurisdiction, we decided we'd hold a conference, and it really was just, let's hold a conference and let's, invite people and see if they want to catch on to the vision. Our first conference was held at the Sofitel in Fiji back in 2018. It attracted 110, not only lawyers, but we got law students, we got medical doctors who were hungry for something similar. We got in-house counsel and government lawyers, but from 5 different countries. And then because they were demanding for a second one so soon, we're like, hey, with this all on volunteer time and we still need to put food on our table, we'll hold it every 2 years instead. We held our second one just before COVID hit, which was in January 2020. And because borders were starting to close around the world, we only managed to get about 80 delegates across, but they were from 7 countries this time. We had our first delegates attending from Singapore and the US of A, which was very good. And so next year, we were supposed to have another conference this year, but because of COVID, we need people to be able to recover and recoup. And so next year, our Kiln conference is going to be held in the Naivasha region in Kenya. At the end of the last conference, we got a specific word about being intentional about our international, and we have 2 people on our global committee sitting in Nairobi, Kenya. So they've put up their hand to host, and we're hosting our next conference in Kenya. That's August next year.
That's awesome. Wow. So your trip to Cambridge, was that about setting up or preparing for next year's conference?
So the Cambridge conference was it was hosted by an American group called Faith and Law around the globe, and they held that in conjunction with the UK's Christian law firms and the Germany's Christ jurists, they're called, judicial officers who identify as being Christian. And that was a large conference. That was 250, but they gave Kiln a platform. We recognize that these are associations and entities that have been long-standing for decades, and we were really privileged to be given an opportunity to share not only about Kiln, but the work that we were doing quite organically in the Asia Pacific region. But to also invite them to come down to Kenya. We were conscious that in Cambridge there was also a large African contingent attending, of both English and Francophone background speaking. So, it opened up all sorts of possibilities of how we best prepare for Kenya. If there's one reflection I brought out of it, I was increasingly happy at the fact that Kiln was an entity that came out of our region of the world. Most of these established associations are, come out of the Northern Hemisphere and from very well-developed countries. So to have ties not only back to Australia, Fiji, and be an encouragement to the Asia Pacific region, that was really great to be able to share at that platform.
That's awesome. Great work. Now, you studied law after graduating high school with a class of 97. Where did you find the inspiration to do law? Has it always been something that you wanted to do? And where did you study?
if I can be really honest, my reasons for studying law were quite shallow at the time. We had a careers day in St. Joseph, and in true fashion, they rolled out all the Venn diagrams where they showed you, you know, if you're good at history, if you're good at geography, if you're good at economics, all these circles intersected. And at the point of intersection, this is the career that you could be. And they had things like librarian, economist, you could be an artist, you could be a lawyer. And at the time I thought, well, I quite like, I'd like to go back to the other side of the world. I've had a taste of what privileged lifestyle looks like. I'm going to go for the job that's going to give me the most money. And so I zoned in on being a lawyer. That really is the honest truth of how it came about. I have to say, after all those years of studying, and when I first started work, because I was on a partial government scholarship and I had to return to Fiji and serve my bond time, I started my career off in the office of the DPP in Suva, and nothing could be further from the truth. I think my first year annual salary was Fijian 24,000, which was a lot for government workers, but you know, we would spend it in Traps Bar every fortnight and it went pretty quickly. But yeah, it was that probably is where it started. I think towards the end of my law degree, I then came to realize just what a noble calling being a lawyer was, and you know, that you're called to certain places with a certain skill set to make a difference and to give informed advice. So it's a calling we don't take lightly. We try our best at it, and yeah, other than the pressures and the and definitely the hard slog that goes with being a lawyer, you have other things like the network that helps remind you why you do what you do.
Exactly. Going back to your time in the DPP in Suva, is there a particular case that sticks out in your memory? And if so, why?
Right. So when I worked at the DPPs in Suva, I was part of the serious fraud team, but I also did a large cohort of work with serious offences relating to robbery with violence. But I think the one that stands out for me, because you had a bag or mixture of sorts, involved a lady whose file came across my desk for assault occasioning actual bodily harm, and it was a charge made against her because of harm that had been done against her child, who was a baby, and trying to de-identify as I go along. And you know, just the circumstances of the case were that she had harmed her child with a mosquito coil, and then she had jumped into the car with the child, and then they had run into the local police post, causing all sorts of damage. And when the file first came across my desk, and I got into the nuts and bolts of it, I came to realize that one, it was a family dispute. Two, she was living with her in-laws, so it was an extended family setting. And three, I picked up very quickly that she was suffering a real serious bout of postnatal depression. And she was being represented by legal aid at the time. She was also in remand, and she was heavily pregnant with their second child. The main charge was that of assault occasioning actually bodily harm, but the second charge was a property damage charge relating to state property because it was the police post. And then the third charge, which was almost like a secondary charge, was that of being unlicensed and driving. So she didn't know how to drive, but in her desperateness to get away, she put her and the baby in the car and landed in the police post. And I worked particularly hard with the legal aid lawyer to not take it through the criminal justice system, mainly because, as I said, there were a lot of factors at play. But you know, my witnesses were going to be family members, her parents-in-law who witnessed the event, her husband who, in spite of numerous instructions that, you know, you can't interfere with state witnesses, he was actually turning up to the remand center to visit his wife and baby, and they were still being breastfed. And then, you know, just working with other authorities to keep the unit still close together. So it was one of those matters that we conceded not to go forward and prosecute. I got a very strong rap on the wrist by the judge at the time. But I think we landed on doing the right thing by the family with certain systems in place. So we had to ensure that she was getting mental health help from counselors involved. We also had to ask if there was a way as to which she could go and recover separately and outside of the family home. And we had to ensure that there was a support structure put up and around her to, have her deliver safely their second child, try and preserve the family unit, and, you know, fingers crossed they would make their way out of a bad situation.
Yeah. Some of the cases that come up in Fiji are really quite sad, especially when you sort of have to scrape the bottom of the barrel to try and sort things out for them as well.
And understanding the culture and also, you know, the family dynamics of how it works back at home, the extended family household and the reliance on each other, that also helps inform us in our decision making.
Exactly. With your career, how long have you practiced law now? Do you specialize in a certain field? And what's your current role?
Great. So I started off my career in criminal law, being a prosecutor for the state in Suva, and then I did that for almost 5 years before I went into private practice. And in private practice, I branched out into doing other litigation type matters. So anything relating to dispute resolution, did a bit of family law, did some employment law, did some civil procedure, civil litigation, law. And then I came across to Australia and did similar sorts, but probably honing in a bit more with employment law. And then I came to this firm and I did that for about 2 years before we noticed that our firm was just starting to grow. And I was asked by the partners at the time if I would be interested in helping grow the firm, but in more a business development capacity. I have a second degree in international business. I'd never used it for about 10 years. I hadn't used it for 10 years. And so it was a great opportunity. And I got into that role for about 6 years before the firm evolved again. And now my current role is that of a general manager for the firm. So I oversee the operations of the firm at the moment, covering all sorts from business development to HR, finance, and our support staff. Having a legal background has really helped in that sense. Every now and then I'll get pulled back on the tools to deal with some migration matters or, couple of wills and estates, but mainly looking after our staff.
My next question to you is going to be about challenges that you face in your current role, but I don't think we'll go down that road. Being a general manager and having to sort of oversee the whole running of the firm, I'm sure you'd have lots of challenges. What keeps you interested, though, and motivated in what you do?
I've only just stepped into this new role as recent as 2 months ago, so it's still quite fresh and new to me. I've seen this firm grow. When I first joined it, I was one of 30 lawyers. Now we're almost at a cohort of about 40, and we've got about 2 offshore support based out of Fiji. So, there's there's enough to keep me interested currently. I think probably one of my major challenges, which you learn and you evolve with, is dealing with people.
Very true.
But taking them on the journey with you. You know, I hate to use the word buy-in, but I almost feel like, what got me really interested in this film was the vision and its mission, which relate a lot to our calling as being lawyers and seeking to deliver just and redemptive outcomes for our clients, but then, filtering that so that all our staff understand it and finding their own unique way to treat their work as ministry and in exemplifying that calling. So, yeah, it keeps me interested. It keeps me motivated. New challenges every day. It's constantly a barrage of things that come through the door, but it's learning to prioritize as well what's going to, what you need to attend to and what can wait.
I'd like to offer our congratulations as well, Heilala, on your recent appointments to the Queensland Law Society Committee positions.
Thank you.
And I understand that you're one of 4 from your firm that were appointed. What does that role entail, though?
Yeah, that one took me by surprise, Emily. Just, with so many things going on, and then, oh, by the way, would you volunteer your services for one of our subcommittees? But it is an honor, and to have 4 of our lawyers serving in our peak body, which is the Queensland Law Society, yeah, it's great. I'm part of the innovation committee. Feel like I haven't done much, to be honest, but the couple of meetings that I have attended and to make contribution to, it involves around technological advancement in law and how we can best serve the legal members within the society. And that, for the subcommittee that I serve on, that relates to e-trials, so electronic trials. So what it means is, you no longer have to physically go to court. And in fact, this was pushed and tested when COVID occurred, in that, firms were being called into court electronically to appear and to argue their different cases. I'm sure some of you might have seen the famous cat case where a barrister, his child had put on the filter of a cat, and every time the judge popped up, his face was a cat as opposed to the judge's face. Yeah, well, thankfully we don't have to deal with that. But what we do deal with is just streamlining our processes. So I think I can share with you, that we're in the development phase of when you have like complex litigation, which involves thousands of documentation, and you come to like a disclosure process where you've got to, share all that paper and knowledge with the other party. It's a matter of ensuring that you follow Supreme Court direction electronically to get your papers in order. And that could be having unique barcodes across them or entering metadata into it, so that when you present in court, it's literally at, search and click of buttons, and it's going up in court while you're running witnesses through examination. So all very futuristic, and I must admit that I haven't really quite got my head around it. I marvel at our litigation lawyers in-house who know how to do it and who know how to compile briefs in accordance with the direction. But yeah, it's definitely something that our sector looks forward to, and makes the administration of law and justice more efficient.
Wow. Now, with all of that, Heilala, how do you balance life out? Because you've got a career that is so encompassing. You're busy, literally traveling the world as well while you're working. But how do you balance that out for some me time, so for family time, and all of that?
Yeah, great question, Emily. somebody had asked me that recently, just last week in Fiji, and I had no answer for them but to say it was Jesus, because I really don't know how else I was doing it. Living on a prayer, and sometimes you fly by the seat of your pants and you just pray for wisdom to come and the right words at the right time. But yes, my faith and my, pursuance of spirituality and Christian living is a large part of that. But I, also take time to do other things. Staying in commune with my family is also very important to me, and we're quite spread out. I'm the only one in Australia of my immediate family. The rest of them are in, the bulk of them are in New Zealand, and I've got siblings in Fiji, and I've got a sister out in France. And it's staying in touch with them. It's trying to stay physically fit as well. And this year I only just took up powerlifting to manage the stress
Well done.
of what I do. And every time you want to probably do something else, you just pick up a 60-kilo dumbbell instead. And but yeah, physical, your spiritual, and your emotional is very important. So staying in touch with family, and I also have a great support here in Brisbane, friends and my own extended family, and I also get counselling done in regular intervals for mental health balance.
Oh, that's great. Now, if you weren't a lawyer, what other career might you have chosen?
As a child, I wanted to be a doctor, but I was never good at science. I didn't like basic science, so that didn't eventuate. But as I went through secondary and then into university, I sort of harbored passion for going into foreign diplomacy. And my dad served in our High Commission in London in the 80s. That's why we were there. And I think I sort of developed an interest for diplomatic relations, international affairs.
Mm-hmm.
Liking history was also part and parcel of that. So yeah, I'd hope I'd make a good dignitary or a good diplomat at the least. Certainly some of the negotiation skills from around the table would help at that. But yeah, that'd probably be the default that I'd go back to. If not that, a travel agent, because I'm good with travel.
Now, so coming up to some of the fun and light stuff, okay? If you were to host a dinner party and were allowed to invite 3 influential people, right? They could have passed, or they could still be living. Who would you choose and why?
I'd like to invite Michelle Obama. That'd be guest 1. And I think it would be, I've heard this saying that behind every successful man is an even powerful woman. So she was the wife of the first president of color. And I think I'd just like to ask her, what that felt like, and then to watch it, go from their leadership to a man who ran the election campaign along the line of racial tension, and then to try and, go back and win it again for the Democratic Party. But, just she exudes so much grace and strength in how she was the first lady of color in the White House. So I would like to have her at dinner party. I'd like to invite Jesus. Again, that's just my Christian faith coming through there. He invited all to the table, all and sundry, from the Sadducees to the sinner. And, how you just keep loving and forgiving in the light of human frailty, really. And just what heaven looks like. If he could tell me on this side of eternity rather than on the other. And I think the third one would be Enid Blyton, and that's an ode to my primary school days. My love for reading came from reading her storybooks. She was just such an creative writer. She had a great imagination, and it was just, you'd pick up an Enid Blyton book and it was just one of those that drew you in from the first page. So I'd like to know where she got her creative genius from and, what inspired her. I mean, the Tale of the Faraway Tree and, Miss Wash-a-Lot and throwing soapy water over brow branches. I'd love to know more about that.
Now, when you have them over for dinner then, would you serve your favorite dish and beverage? If you would, then what is your favorite dish and beverage?
I think I'd keep it really simple. A good steak and mash and some vegetables, to be honest. And probably a favorite wine of mine from the Barossa Valley. I'd ask Mom how to serve it, or even better yet, get her to come in and help me do it. And so she still makes a mean steak. And I go crawling over to theirs just to get my steak fix every now and then. In fact, I'm trying to get her across to help me. Yeah.
Well, I was going to ask you whether you were going to actually cook the dinner.
No.
Okay, now do you follow any sporting teams?
Oh, we're from Fiji, Emily. Rugby's all the code and the rave. I grew up in a house full of girls, so they were more about netball. But as I've gotten older, I've loved following the different codes of rugby. Go the Queensland Maroons. Sorry, all you Sydney siders.
Go the Blues.
Yeah, and I also enjoy following the Wallabies, who seem to be having a more successful tour in recent times.
Yeah. What do you do in your downtime?
Again, I like to go for walks with my girl group here in Brisbane. Again, it's searching for beautiful, picturesque nature or natural places where you can just go and admire creation. But yeah, it's just enjoying deep friendships, deep relationship, finding out how everybody else is, being grateful in that. And just spending time in the outdoors, not the serious stuff like camping, but just the more lighter walking and being in commune. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know about camping either. I prefer to glamp. What's the funniest thing that's ever happened to you? Not counting that fall at St. Joseph's that you did in your brand new uniform.
No, I'll be honest, I read this question and it stumped me. And I said to my siblings, I'm not a funny person. I'm quite serious in everything that I do. I don't know what could be so funny. But, I'll share with you, just recently, I returned from Europe and I went to France to see my sister, who I hadn't seen before COVID, Ikitanga. And I was also met by my older sister, Kalesi, up there. And we had a great time. COVID with its closed borders had kept us all separated. And I was meeting my two nieces for the very first time. And I wouldn't say it's the funniest thing, but we had a lot of fun times in the sense that, it doesn't matter how successful you get in life. When you get back in and among family, you just fall into rank and file. And, there were many moments where I'm so used to having my own personal space, but it's Europe and you're staying in hotels where you can barely swing a cat in and you're sharing space again with your older sister or older sibling. And, just the quirkiness of like having them, do their stretches and then, knocking things over and almost knocking you over in the process. And then, enjoying the silliness and the craziness that goes with it, but also introducing your nieces to that as well. So, they've been brought up in a very French environment. So, dancing around the kitchen table in your pajamas to Kylie Minogue's Locomotion is just unheard of. But, those sorts of fun things we really, really enjoyed in having our time together. And just a real reiteration that, family, you can't live with them. You can't live without them. They've seen you in your highs. They've seen you in your lows. And they're the one thing that's constant.
Oh, absolutely. What are you most proud of?
I'd probably say the decision to move back to Australia when I was just turning 30 or early 30s. Actually, I was 31 when I moved back to Australia permanently. So I did my law degree here in Brisbane, on the south side at Griffith University. I spent 6 long years there getting my double degree, and then you have to do a course in order to get your admission to the Supreme Court here as a legal practitioner. That takes 6 months, and then I had to do another course to do my master's. And then I thought I was just home sailing, and then I went home to Fiji. But after 6 years of working there, and the coup changes things, I made the brave decision to come back to Australia and start again from scratch. And I was at an age where I was 31, and my peers in Fiji were either in senior leadership in government, or they were starting their own law firm practices, or they were in middle management and statutory bodies. And I was starting again from scratch here in Brisbane, having worked here for some time. And it was a real humbling experience. It took me about 18 months to crack back into the legal sector here. And I did everything from re-tapping into my university networks to going back to even working part-time with the university, and leaning into old contacts to try and get a foot through the door. But once you're in and you work hard, and you got to work hard to prove yourself because the competition's tight, and especially in our sector where it's still quite, leadership levels are quite male dominated, and they're Australian based. It was a steep learning curve throughout, and just having to adapt and humbling yourself at every stage and being open to change.
I must say, Heilala, the whole family is very, very proud of you with the way you started from scratch in your early 30s, and you've actually just grown from there. So well done and congratulations. Now, our last question, because I am very mindful of the time, and before we open up for some questions, if anyone's got some, who has been the biggest influence in your life?
It's cliche, but I've got to say my parents. It is cliche, but we've done a lot as a family, and their steadiness in terms of guiding us through highs and lows, and just always being in our corner has been, oh gosh, now I'm getting all emotional. But it as I said, it has been a constant. And we've been through a lot as a family, but they've always been in our ear, and helped each one of us, even through the different and the difficult stages. So it's really credit to them that I get to sit where I sit, and that sort of groundedness has probably held not only myself but my siblings in the long term. And I'm really grateful for them. So thanks, Mum. I can see in the bottom of the screen.
Thank you, Age. That was beautiful. Ange, do we have any questions at all? None in the chat room? Okay. Does anyone have any questions for Heilala?
I do want to share that PowerPoint that I put together, though.
Yeah, we would like that. Okay, so now we'll give H some time just to get a drink as well.
Yeah.
But I'll get you to share that PowerPoint, Ange.
Thank you.
Yeah. Do you want to see your PowerPoint presentation? Okay.
Sorry, I didn't quite hear that.
I was going to say, did you want to see your PowerPoint presentation?
Sure.
Go and get a drink. Go and get a drink. And I'll try and
Thank
work
you.
out what I'm doing. Okay. It's still coming.
Okay.
Okay. I'll share screen. And that one. Can you see the screen?
Yep.
Yeah.
Oh, good. Can you
Oh,
see the whole
that's
screen?
gold.
My computer's a bit slow. Sorry.
Can you spot the star?
Can you see that? All right, that's all the photos we've got. Do you see all of that?
Yeah.
Yes, thank you so much. Wow. Great rating of photos, Emily.
Oh dear.
Oh, wow.
Thank you, H. So, thank you for sharing your life with us. I know that's just a little bit, and would love to be able to sit in Talanoa a little bit more. But on behalf of our committee, we also thank you for agreeing to do this tonight. This is our last one for the year. So Heilala Tabete, this is your life, and we wish you the very best going forward.
Thank you very much, Emily, and thank you, ladies. It's been a pleasure.
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you.
Okay, so we're done for the evening.